Brought to you by Moonbeam Multimedia.
This is 16 to 1, a podcast about education, teaching, and learning.
Hello.
Hey,
Hi.
how you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing well. You survived your homecoming duties?
Yep.
You put on a dance?
I did. Yep.
Yeah.
It's all good. I'm gonna, I think, start teaching now.
Oh, good.
I think I'm finally gonna get into
It's
it.
that time of year.
If you're any type of teacher and also advisor, coach, whatever, the struggle is real.
You picked up some extracurriculars.
Yeah, and also just being in charge of yearbook, like fall is the busiest. We have
Yes.
the most things to cover now. So, doing well.
Okay.
How are things your way?
Doing fine.
Good.
Kat kept me company during my workday. I've rewarded her with some nips, so she'll leave us alone so we can record.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We'll see how long that lasts. This is our first episode of the new thing.
Yeah, we're just covering education news headlines this week. Don't forget, we're now going to alternate every other episode. You can pick and choose what you like. If you like the news, the current events.
This one is for you.
Before we get into our news headline roundup, just want to remind you, go ahead and sign up for the 16 to 1 podcast email newsletter. That's where you'll find all the latest updates, episode announcements, resources, workshop offerings, everything like that from Moonbeam Multimedia. That is us. This week in our headlines, we are starting off in our own home state of Ohio for a few points of embarrassment to run through.
True.
It feels like whenever Ohio is in education news.
Any news.
Yeah, it's just,
There's no good news from Ohio.
okay.
Unless the Buckeyes won, there's not much else.
Yeah. Well, hey, we did do that this weekend. That was
Barely.
good. Starting out, we covered this story in depth in episode 109. It was our episode on high stakes testing. But we have more to discuss having to do with the Ohio State Teachers Retirement System. That's the teacher pension system, of which you are a part, right?
I am.
This affects you in real time.
With my money.
So, as
Maybe.
maybe it is. Maybe
it was.
isn't. It was
Probably never will be, but
Yeah.
it is mine as it goes in every pay.
Past tense, it was your money. STRS has been embroiled in chaos for months now over a pension investment scheme allegedly involving, and this is according to Ohio Attorney General Dave Yost and his many subpoenas, bribery, corruption, mishandling of funds, things like that.
Normal.
That's all happening. And then in addition to that, that seemed to have been sparked by this other thing entirely, which was that the executive director of STRS was being investigated for workplace misconduct. So just put a pin in that for a second. So
More of my money.
Wade Steen was a member of this board, this guy. He was appointed by Governor Mike DeWine. He was then removed by Governor Mike DeWine. He successfully sued to be reinstated to the board. And then just recently, he had his last day at work.
Okay. Goodbye, Wade.
Yeah, goodbye, Wade. But also, in a kind of surprise to everyone, it also turned out to be the rather unceremonious last day for the executive director, Bill Neville, the one who had been on paid leave while Yost investigated him. He was being investigated for violent and or sexually explicit outbursts in the workplace.
And/or is not great there.
He was being investigated for that. They hired an outside law firm. The law firm couldn't really find anything conclusive that this had been going on.
Okay.
There seemed to be something fishy going on in the workplace, but they were kind of non-specific about the nature of it. But
Yikes.
they voted to just part ways with him. So, and Steen abstained from this vote, but they voted to end Neville's employment contract.
Okay.
So that's an update on STRS. There's still this reformer versus non-reformer, that's what they're calling it, fight about whether or not to proceed with the investment scheme with QED, that's this outside investment consulting group, they're still fighting about whether or not to proceed with that plan with how to invest your money.
So that they can pay themselves even more.
They do like to reward themselves with bonuses, even if they don't actually make a lot of money for teachers. And in fact,
no, they don't.
Even when they lose lots of money.
I was going to say, when was the last time they made money?
So that's the update from
Awesome.
STRS. We're following this ongoing development.
It was a great
story.
episode. I'm going to go cry.
Okay.
And withdraw my retirement immediately.
Well, there's some more news from Columbus, but this
Okay.
doesn't actually impact your retirement. So maybe
No.
this one will be a little better for you.
Columbus City Schools.
Yes.
We've talked about Columbus Public before. Their board vice president, Tina Pierce, and a member, Jennifer Adair, are accused of having coached another board member named Brandon Simmons on how to avoid fallout and redirect criticism after the leaking of a controversial memo entitled Taking Control of the Task Force Narrative. That memo was written by Brandon Simmons, and it landed him in hot water.
A little bit, yeah.
So members of the Columbus education community are calling for the resignation of both Pierce and Simmons, whose memo was leaked by the Columbus Teachers Union and contained thoughts along the lines of, let's drive a wedge between the district's two unions by using racial dynamics and issues, and let's change meeting venues last minute, and or just bring in really loud equipment to disrupt the union press conference. So,
Yeah.
very mature, very professional,
Yeah.
a little messy for Columbus
A
City.
lot messy.
They do not need messy. They have enough to deal with.
This memo, by the way, the narrative that over which he's trying to assert control, right, is about the board having voted to close schools. And it was a very unpopular vote, and it
Yes.
wasn't particularly well backed up with data, at least according to many stakeholders in the Columbus school system. So basically, they were under fire for an unpopular decision. Their response was double down and get really nasty and distract by...
Oh, like a red herring.
Yeah, well, they were like, let's, instead of dealing with this criticism, let's make the teachers union look bad
Good.
by employing racial hatred. And
Perfect.
so this memo got penned. There was like a
So
big
bad.
like we got to figure out who wrote the memo. And then he had fellow board members do a bit of cover-up work and coaching work to try to make it all. Yeah.
I would not feel safe if I worked
I
there.
would feel, if I were a taxpayer in this district, I would be losing my mind. And I have friends who are in this district, and I feel for them because they're like, I just want my kid to get a good education, and this is so much of a distraction, and it's just, I'm sad to hear it. I hope, I don't know what I hope. I hope that this whole board undergoes some titanic change, because it sounds like it's failing at every level to carry out its responsibility to the students in this district. So,
What a mess.
okay, we'll look for some updates there and see how that all shakes out.
Okay. More from Ohio?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, to round out all of that goodness, there's a new ProPublica report just been released. It highlights Ohio's unprecedented foray into using public taxpayer funding for the construction and renovation of private religious schools.
Nice.
So this became possible due to a huge expansion in Ohio's school voucher program. ProPublica notes in its report that the private schools, and most of them are Catholic schools, that have received funding from the Ohio legislature in this manner aren't obligated to answer public questions about how the funds are used. About how the funds are used, because
That's cute. They're private schools, of course.
they're private schools.
Yeah, they don't have to.
So public reporting requirements that are attached to public money, not necessarily in play here. So
Awesome.
I would say if you live in Ohio and you're concerned about this, go ahead and write your representatives.
But don't write to the Board of Education at Columbus City Schools, and don't write to the STRS members. Okay.
Or
Probably not.
AG Yost or
Houston.
the Ohio legislature.
Okay.
Okay.
So
Write to somebody else other than those people.
leave Ohio, start a farm, find peace.
Speaking of leaving Ohio, do you want to take us to our next story, which is all the way down in Florida?
This will make me feel better. Okay.
Great.
So last year, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed House Bill 1069 into law.
Yes.
It enacted sweeping legislation that on top of banning instruction on sexual orientation and gender identity for K through 8th graders and prohibiting schools from enforcing policies of respecting people's pronouns, it also requires a suspension of instructional materials alleged to contain pornography or obscene depictions of sex.
Mm-hmm.
The largest publisher in the USA, which is Penguin Random House, has joined forces with other publishing groups like Hachette, HarperCollins, Simon & Schuster, and others, as well as a few of my favorite best-selling authors like John Green and Lori Halls Anderson and Jodi Picoult, in a new lawsuit against the state of Florida alleging the unconstitutionality of the law. So in a press release, Penguin Random House said that, quote, "The lawsuit focuses on restoring the discretion of trained educators to evaluate books holistically to avoid harm to students who will otherwise lose access to a wide range of viewpoints."
Yeah.
Just a few thoughts. This might be my hill for the day or for this episode.
You found a hill?
I think this is my current hill.
Okay.
In Florida, teachers are at risk of losing their jobs if they do not properly handle these bans, which has caused many to just throw away books that hadn't been banned yet, anticipation and out of fear of being penalized or even losing their license. In the state of Florida, once an objection is made, the book has to be removed within 5 days, and it may remain unavailable indefinitely, even without a proper evaluation, which is a pretty tough spot to be in as a teacher. It's hard to lose a book when you've prepped for a book and it's gone one day. So it's still developing. We will definitely update more, but the star power alone of this feels good. These are authors who fight this fight. Lori Halls Anderson, Jodi Picoult, Angie Thomas. These are people who fight the fight. The Green brothers, of course, John Green in this case. So I'm excited to watch that boxing match for sure. That pleases me greatly to see that lineup.
Yep. So should we move on to our next story in publishing?
Yeah.
Okay. There's a lawsuit, Hachette versus the Internet Archive. And a federal judge has just ruled against the Internet Archive, siding with 4 major publishers, in fact, and that's Hachette, Wiley & Sons, HarperCollins, and Penguin Random House. The court found that the Internet Archive's practice of scanning and lending digital copies of copyrighted books through its National Emergency Library and Open Library. They opened the National Emergency Library in the wake of COVID-19, by the way, I'm just throwing that out there, that this constituted copyright infringement. The ruling emphasized that converting print books into digital formats and distributing them without permission violated copyright law, rejecting the Internet Archive's fair use defense. The decision, which the Internet Archive plans to appeal, could have significant consequences for libraries offering digital lending services. I just have a side note about this.
We've talked about this quite a bit, actually.
We're
the kind of people who discuss things like ebook licensing and audiobook licensing.
I have a lot of thoughts about ebook licensing, okay?
I know.
Listen.
The amount of conversations we've had about this, not for the podcast, is entirely too high.
It's an extractive scheme, and it was invented by publishers for the benefit of publishers. Publishers are fighting to enshrine their monopolies on how ebooks work in law, basically. It's part of what's going on with court cases like this. They are fighting digitization efforts. And I think that what made the Internet Archive's library unique is that they lent out copies according to the presence of physical copies. So I think their argument was like, we own a book. And I also think that they were trying to say that the scanning made it a transformative use of the material.
Gotcha.
But they were like, if I own a paper copy of a book, it's mine to do with what I please. I can lend that book to somebody if I want to. Why can't I copy the book and lend the digital copy
to one person?
To one person at a
time.
Yes.
Not make 1 million copies of the one copy.
No.
Yes.
So that was what's at stake. I'm very curious to see how this goes on appeal. This is going to be a very long and uphill battle for the Internet Archive. I would love to work with any library systems who are working at the forefront of publishing and distribution of digital titles. I mean,
in related Livy news, this was apparently my week to get every book I've ever wanted.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how long the timeline is.
No, the extremely limited availability of these titles makes that way more likely. It's just like you don't have anything that you want right there in the moment, and then 6 months later, they all come at once. That's how it works.
I've had 4 books come available this week.
Yeah.
I can't do anything but read because I don't want to wait again.
Yeah.
I don't know when I'll see it again.
I know.
What if it goes away?
Well, that's the other thing. I've had titles where before I actually got to check them out, they took them out of the library.
Yeah, so this is my week, so I got to go buy 4 books to listen to.
Okay, so let's end on some college admissions and student loan news. These are actually 2 pieces of relatively good news for the little guy, I think. So do you want to start out in California?
Not Ohio.
Not for once.
California.
Or Florida.
Someone in California must have heard us pining for a ban of legacy admissions after our episode on Varsity Blues. Lawmakers there just voted to ban legacy admissions at private universities like Stanford in a 26-5 vote by the state Senate. Governor Gavin Newsom has until the end of the month to either sign or veto that bill. If the bill becomes law, California would join Maryland, Virginia, Colorado, and Illinois in banning preferential treatment for donors or family members of alumni of these colleges.
Yeah. I'm not sure that this has much teeth. I think in an earlier version of this bill, somebody wanted to attach some consequences. Like, for example, you won't get funding from the state of California if you allow legacy admissions. But I think that got stripped out of the final version.
There's no way that would work, right?
That's my question about this legislation now is like, will people really take it seriously if there's not a consequence for not doing it?
Okay. Like, would I get like a slap on the wrist?
I don't.
Bad Stanford.
Bad Stanford, bad.
You're going to be thinking about this for so long. Bad. Okay.
Somebody's trying to do something about it, at least.
They want to appear to do something about it.
Yeah, okay. That's a good way of saying it.
There we go.
Okay, and then our final story for this week. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau has banned student loan servicer Navient from providing services for federal student loans forever, indefinitely. Forever.
That was a firm statement for this podcast to declare.
Forever. After reaching a $120 million settlement over Navient's, quote, years of failures and lawbreaking, unquote. That's from the CFPB press release on this.
Okay. A normal quote.
Years of failures and lawbreaking. Navient is alleged to have charged improper fees, denied borrowers access to loan repayment histories, shared inaccurate public service loan forgiveness eligibility information, and steered borrowers into higher interest payment plans when more affordable plans were available. That settlement will be dispersed by Navient to eligible borrowers.
I'm trying to imagine how mad I would be if this was my student loan service.
It sounds like they're preying on people getting frustrated and giving up.
Yeah.
That's what it sounds like.
I feel like that's kind of their only hope at this point.
Yeah.
Okay,
so,
Navient.
Yeah.
Well, that's it for the news.
That is
Maybe we'll try to find some different states for the next round.
Maybe
Ohio could stay out of the news.
If Ohio could be a little less newsworthy, that would be really cool. This is Fill in the Blank, our trivia portion where we ask you questions. You write into us, hello@16to1.com, all spelled out. If you have the correct answer to the trivia question and you send us your address, we'll send you a sticker. Or even if you don't have the right answer, we'll send you stickers.
We'll just send you stickers.
We like hearing from you. So here is last episode's question. We've been talking about FAFSA and student loans a lot over the last year. Let's throw it back to the original.
FAF.
Originally called FAF, the financial aid form, was created in the Higher Education Act of what year?
1965.
65. It's been around for a while.
Older than I expected it to be.
Yeah, you would think that
think for its age it'd run better.
You would think that the Department of Education could by now have figured out a system.
The internet?
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
You're the only one surprised by that one.
I'm just going to let that thought trail off. How about you ask this episode's question?
Okay. So one of our very favorite TV shows just turned 25, The West Wing.
Yeah.
If you're unfamiliar, it's a political drama and it stars one of the most incredible casts ever. Martin Sheen as the president and then Allison Janney as, I don't want to give too much away. Allison Janney as his press secretary. We just started the rewatch.
I love how the stars that you chose out of this were Martin Sheen and Allison Janney. Like nobody else.
I don't care about
matters.
Rob Lowe. He did this to himself.
Okay.
So The West Wing was the first TV show created by whom? Prior to writing this show, this creator worked as a writer and a director for films such as A Few Good Men and The American President, among many others. And The American President is one of my probably top 10 favorite movies.
Yeah.
What'd you learn?
Oh, I learned a couple weeks ago that NASA deployed a ship with a solar sail, which I think is very cool. There's a Star Trek episode where...
Of course there is.
Yeah, there is.
Can't wait for the day there are whales in space and you can say, there's an episode about that.
The whales
It's going to be the end of my life.
are in space. Yeah, I don't think. Maybe they are.
Let's not focus too much
Okay.
on the whales. Less about the whales. More about the solar sail.
Okay, so back to the Star Trek episode. There's a Star Trek episode where the captain of the space station and his son build and deploy a ship
was the
that
captain?
uses a solar sail.
Are you talking about Shatner?
This is in DS9.
Oh my gosh.
So anyway,
It's the one with the good hair?
no, that's Strange New Worlds.
Oh, I quit.
DS9 is the older one, the one with
Kate Mulgrew?
nope, that's Voyager.
Worf?
Worf was in it.
Okay,
yeah.
Worf.
It was kind of a crossover that started at the same time that TNG was running.
This is so depressing.
Deep Space Nine.
Okay.
How did we get here?
I tried to be
Father
cute.
and son build a ship that runs with a solar sail. That's where I was going with that. And they're really beautiful. They use radiation from the sun as fuel. So that's what I learned, that NASA deployed a ship that uses that technology.
Radiation from the sun.
The other thing that I've
That
been
is
learning,
cool.
the other thing I've been learning, I've been reading a book called Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman. It's a little bit dated at this point, but it's still a pretty interesting exploration of the concept of emotional intelligence and social emotional learning. It ended up talking about a lot of what we talked about in our last episode, actually, with student well-being and mental health and things like that, nurturing a whole student as opposed to thinking of them as just like little test-taking machines. We developed their capacity for emotional intelligence as well. So good learning opportunity, lots of interesting studies.
Nice.
What did you learn in the last couple of weeks?
Well, because this was my week with all my Libby books, I just finished reading The Boys in the Boat by Daniel James Brown, which is a book about the University of Washington's rowing team that competed in the 1936 Olympics in Berlin, which is pretty commonly known as the Hitler Olympics. It's a great book. I don't know much about rowing, but I loved the story.
You do now.
And the audiobook was so good.
Cool.
So good. If you're a Gilmore Girls fan, it is read by Richard from Gilmore Girls before he passed, obviously. So it was a really nice, warm hug for 14 hours.
Okay.
It was so nice to hear him. Okay. The Ohio School Report Cards came out. If you know any teachers in Ohio, pray for them, drink for them,
Drink for them.
something.
Raise a glass.
And my last little thing,
Yes.
just make sure you're registered to vote. Check your state, wherever you live.
Yes. Even if you think you're already registered,
Just double
make
check.
sure that you haven't
double
been
check.
purged from the rolls, because that is a thing that can happen and has been happening a lot in the lead ups to this election
So
season.
every state is different. I'll include a link in the show notes for kind of a directory for how to check for you. So make sure you're signed up to vote, you're registered to vote, and you have a voting plan. Democracy needs you.
Okay. Any final thoughts? Parting shots?
No.
Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you in 2 weeks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hey listeners, thanks for supporting 16 to 1. We're your co-hosts. I'm Chelsea Adams.
And I'm Katie Day. Find our show notes, archives, and resources, sign up for our newsletter, or get in touch with us via the contact form at 16to1.com, all spelled out.
We are so grateful for our listener support. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing to the show and telling your friends or colleagues about it.
The show is edited and produced by you, Chelsea Adams, and you're also responsible for our show's music.
And you, Katie Day, serve as lead researcher and social media manager.
Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you next show.
I haven't made you watch any of that.
Would
It's the
I
one with
know?
the Civil War and the Kardashians, the big lizard guys.
Oh, yeah, the Kardashians. I remember that part.
No. Anyway.
Kim.
Okay, so there's
Chloe.
a Star Trek episode in that show.
Kim and Chloe get out their solar flare. Solar sail. Solar flare. Solar flare the Kardashians. Next.